Hello and welcome to another edition of BNEWS In Depth. I'm your host, Rich Hosford. This month we're going to be taking a look at two groups that are working to fight racism in Burlington Public Schools. The BHS Equity Committee and the parent group Burlington Against Racism have both recently had representatives at the school committee to advocate they hire a director of equity and inclusion. They say this person would help students of color who face racism in school and also would help the administration diversify the faculty. We'll talk to Sara Shaikh of the Equity Committee and Martha Duffield of Burlington Against Racism. We'll also talk with Assistant Superintendent Patrick Larkin to get a take from the administration's point of view. Let's start with my conversation with Sara. Sara, thank you for joining me today and coming down to talk about the work of the Equity Committee and its interactions with the school committee. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me.
Can you just start off kind of general? Do you want to just talk about your role or what you see as the role of the Equity Committee?
So when it comes to the Equity Committee, it was formed in the beginning of last year, the last school year. It was mostly formed because of the ideas proposal that a bunch of students, including me, gave to the school committee in April of 2019. And the whole role at the Equity Committee is to make sure that we respond to the inequity that is in our school system and develop some sort of action plan in order to dismantle the racism and the discrimination that's still happening in our schools.
Yeah, I think, some people might be surprised to hear that, without getting anything, obviously explicit. Just what are some of the, actions or incidents that you are aware of?
I would say for me, I personally have not faced of an extreme racist actions. Obviously, there's some microaggression or stereotypes that I've obviously faced. Like, for example, if I say that I'm from India, then people assume what my religion is. They would say I'm a Hindu. People get shocked at if I tell them that I'm a Muslim from India. And then when it comes to my last name, it's Sheikh. People a lot of times just assume that I'm Arab or like I'm from Pakistan or some Muslim country or stuff like that. But I would say some of my black classmates, they have faced, I would say, more racist incidents just because of I think there are many times where students say the N-word to them, or especially in class discussions, I feel that they can get very uncomfortable because of the way that white students talk about racism or they talk about African Americans. So.
Yeah. During that program after the killing of George Floyd, there was, I think it was shocking for a lot of people.
Yes.
Just how explicit some of the, comments are that some of the students here face.
Yeah, I was there at the vigil, and even I was surprised because I had no clue that so many people faced such extreme racist incidents. I also even thought that Burlington was not a place like that, but it was for them.
And getting back to the committee, how many students are involved? Who kind of makes it up, and what are the different roles that people have?
So when it comes to the student representatives, there are approximately 10 to 15 students who attend the meetings. That's mostly once a month, the entire school year. The students are there mostly to advocate for their own voice and show the adults what problems and what changes that needs to be made so that the adults can actually make the changes and provide some solutions.
And what sort of, I know you've been working on a list of recommendations or action items you'd like to see. We'll get into the creation of the new position in a little bit, but what are some of the other things that you would like to see the school department do?
So I would say that if you looked into the action plan, it's all based off of sections. So when it comes to the staff, we would like to have all faculty and all staff across the entire district take anti-bias and anti-racist training through any programs that are available. We would like even students to take anti-bias training. I personally attended one from the Ideas Conference in my sophomore year, and I think that everyone should be able to take that. Other than that, there's curriculum changes. There are a lot that needs to be made, especially in our history departments. There's a lot of bias, and we need to identify that, change up the textbooks, change up how we teach students about slavery, how we teach the entire Burlington High School population about African Americans or Indigenous people or Native Americans. All of these changes are crucial, and they're all going to take a long time to make.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not just behavior of students here; it's also actual delving into the curriculum and what students are being taught.
Yeah, definitely. Another problem is that we don't really discuss a lot of local or just like the events that are happening around the world, like global events when it comes to like racist like protests or anything like that. I've realized that a lot of teachers are also uncomfortable with me having those conversations with students because they don't know how to talk about stuff like that. And that is one of the things that we would like to change as well.
Do you think a lot of it comes down to, like, on the administration's part, just sort of a lack of understanding or a lack of awareness?
Yeah, I think mostly it's just a matter of them prioritizing this work. I know that there's an easy way to just bring up all these issues when it comes to the professional development that teachers take or stuff like that, but it's just a matter of the administration saying that yes, we would like to do this, and yes, we're going to make it happen right now, I think.
And going back to the changes of curriculum, are you looking at the entire school system, K to 12, or focusing more on the high school?
I think it would be K to 12, definitely. When it comes to history classes, in all of the schools, and even English classes, I know that a lot of students don't read works from people of color. It's always usually white authors. And that's actually one of the things that our English department at the high school is working on. The department head, Mrs. Shannon Janowitz, she is working really hard to change all of that. And that for me is amazing to see. And I would like to see that in all schools, not just the high school.
And what do you think is the importance of, having this also apply to like the elementary students, getting them sort of started early?
Yeah, I would say that it's just more important for them to be exposed to writings of people of color, for them to relate to the stories that they read and the books and the authors of the books that they're reading. I know that like when I was growing up, when I was in elementary school, I don't think I ever read a book from a person of color or a story about an immigrant girl. I don't think I ever did that. And I would love for students right now to be exposed to that material early on so they're not surprised or they don't ignore it when it comes to them reading all this stuff in high school or college. Yeah.
And it might make a difference if it's just sort of part of the curriculum rather than a special event, like, it's February, so we're going to read, African American authors. Maybe just have it, if it's all year, it would just not sort of stand out as much or be more of just a normalizing thing. So I know you've been, attending virtually the school committee meetings, and I also know that some members of the administration and faculty are part of the committee. How have you found working with the administration and the committee? Have they been receptive to you?
So I would actually separate how working with the school administration versus the school committee members. I would say when it comes to administration, Dr. Conte and Mr. Larkin, they have been very supportive with all the plans that we have come up with and all of the concerns that we brought up. And I would like to thank them for this entire initiative. They've been along the way the entire time. But when it comes to the school committee members, I do not see them as receptive, only because that it takes them a lot of time to even just start an equity discussion. When we proposed through the Ideas Committee in April of 2019, they just said how great our presentation was and how they would like to implement change. But after that, there were no conversations regarding equity or all the action items that we brought up in their proposal. There was no conversation until this year in August, July and August of 2020, when I started giving equity reports. And even still, when I used to give equity reports, they would they would be like, great report, Sara, and there would be no follow-up discussion about the actual content that I discussed or any other teachers or parents discussed. And as you can see, the whole conversation with the DEI that happened in August of 2020. So for them to take a year to actually talk it out between themselves, I don't think they're too receptive about this whole idea and the whole equity committee.
Okay, so you would, in an ideal world, want them to just sort of not just listen to you, but actually like hear what you're saying and internalize it?
Yes, I feel like they have always been very supportive verbally. They have always said that they support what the director does, they support what the equity committee does, that they agree all the stuff that the equity committee has proposed, but it's a matter of actually making that investment and that commitment to the actual concrete steps that we're proposing. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned it in acronym form, but one of the big things that has been up for discussion recently is a proposed Director of Equity and Inclusion. Talk about why you think that role, is so critical.
I would say, as a student perspective, I would say that the director position is extremely crucial because we don't have a person who we can easily talk to and report incidents when it comes to racism or discrimination. I would say that a lot of students are afraid, even I am, to report some of the things. I was in the same situation in the beginning of this year, where I saw something and I heard something, but I did not know what to do. And I think that's where the director steps in. That's where the director makes an actual protocol that we all follow when it comes to reporting incidents, when it comes to people feeling traumatized about events that are happening in the entire world, and they have nobody to reach out to when it comes to the school administration. I feel that the director would be that support system for students, especially.
Now, I want to get back to the director in just a second, but something you said, why do you think it is that students are sort of, afraid to report or hesitant to sort of, say what's been going on or what they've seen?
Okay. I feel like with me especially, I don't think that whatever I say would be taken into consideration or will be taken seriously. I think that it might just get tossed over like any other problems. And that's where I feel like that's not how it's supposed to be. That's not how it's supposed to be.
No,
so, yeah.
Definitely not. So back to the director. So, you outlined the role that they would have as far as, being someone to listen to you and for reporting purposes. But what else would you imagine that they, would do on a day-to-day basis?
So obviously there would be a representative for the equity committee. They would come to our meetings. They would be part of the school committee meetings as well to report back what they have been working on. And another thing, when it comes to day-to-day basis, they should be constantly working to make the curriculum changes that I said about earlier. When it comes to training for faculty, for all staff, it would be them who would be planning all of that out, who would make sure that we get that training done this year or whenever they're appointed. Yeah.
What are some of the opportunities, other things that you see coming out of the Equity Committee?
So I mentioned this in the slideshow, like a proposal of the DEI that I was part of at the last school committee meeting. Mm-hmm. I mentioned that there would be a hiring committee and student representatives will be part of the hiring committee. And I believe that me and a lot of the other students who have regularly attended and been part of the equity committee, they would be part of the hiring committee, and they would make sure that the person that we choose is someone that we can always reach out to. So that's one of the opportunities that I clearly see from being part of the equity committee.
And are there other sort of actions that you can see in the future, things that you might not be able to tackle right now, but looking ahead?
So when it comes to looking ahead, I feel like there's a lot of work regarding just creating a support system for students. I know that as in the equity committees, we talked a lot about affinity groups and consultants that not just BIPOC students can have, but even white students, for like to create a safe space. I know that all of this work, it's labeled as long term. So I would say that that would be another issue that we would tackle on next after the director of DEI.
Yeah. And, I know that the committee was kind of like picking a momentum when, everything sort of shut down. How has the pandemic sort of affected your work, or has it?
Actually, I feel like the pandemic has made it even better. I
Really?
know, yeah, I think that when it comes to just our meetings, we have been meeting way more often than we would meet in person. We have been having like, I would say 2 to 3 meetings every month, which is amazing. But also another part is that it's not just the pandemic, it was also the killing of George Floyd. And that's obviously what started us to just speak about it even more, and it literally opened our eyes to make sure that we cannot stop right now. We cannot stop. We have to keep on working towards this whole action plan that we have proposed.
And have the continuation of, of protests and police actions against protesters sort of kept things in focus for you?
Yeah, I feel that for me personally, I would not have realized about what is happening in the world a lot of the time. I feel like being part of the Equity Committee and talking about all these events that are happening in the world, it's truly something that I've never experienced before, and it's truly made me even more knowledgeable and more experienced when it comes to these matters.
And last thing, fellow students who maybe hadn't heard of the Equity Committee or hadn't really thought about joining it or see this, what would you say to kind of inspire them to become part of it?
I would say, I actually said this in my impromptu speech at the school committee, but I know that everyone has a voice. Everyone has a powerful thing inside them to make change happen. And I know that most of the times when it comes to just students, it's not that powerful enough, but once you combine the efforts with adults, and the adults of the Equity Committee are exactly that. They encourage you to take concrete action. They encourage you to stand up for your own voice. And if you would like to be part of that, then definitely be part of the Equity Committee.
All right.
Yeah.
Very good. Actually, I know you have to run to an Equity Committee meeting right now, so
Yes.
I will let you go. But I want to thank you for taking some time and talking about these issues with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We go now to my interview with Martha Duffield, a Burlington parent and member of the group Burlington Against Racism. Let's check it out.
Well, Martha, thanks you for taking some time and coming in today to talk about this important issue.
Thanks for having me.
So I just want to start kind of broad. What is the group Burlington Against Racism, and how did you get involved with it?
So the group Burlington Against Racism was a grassroots action that was formed after the George Floyd murder and the student rally and protests that occurred on the Boston Common. And what had happened was many parents in town got talking about examples and issues that their students had faced or had heard of racism all the way from high school down to kindergarten. And so these private conversations were being had, and I think there was a parent group that was like, we need to do something. And so a couple meetings were formed, and then I had a friend, Becky, and she said, hey, you should come be part of this group. And so I got involved, and now I am part of this great group that's trying to reduce racism in Burlington.
And how many members roughly do you have?
Right now we have like 7 or 8 members.
Okay.
So we're small and nimble.
And has it generated like interesting conversation, like educational, like learning from each other about different things that students face?
Oh, absolutely. And last night 3 of our members tuned into a webinar about promoting social justice as parents. I think everybody is very eager to learn how to be advocates and promote anti-racism, and we're all a real committed group. I think we do want to expand, so if anyone else is interested, we're definitely looking to have a bigger group size and make a bigger impact.
And does the group have like specific goals that it's working towards? Is it kind of more of a general conversation, Sort of what is the activities of the group?
So, main goal, eradicate racism in Burlington, right? But there's sub-goals to that. And initially we want to focus in the schools and target our children because they're the biggest sponges and we can control the narrative and help them feel good. And that's why we've been pushing for this position. I think eventually we'd want to expand to a town-wide level and do, listening sessions and education outreach and, incorporate more community members.
Now, I think when, most people, or maybe most white people, think about Burlington, they don't think of a racist community. What are some of the incidents or things that you have heard from students about what they kind of are facing?
Well, I can only speak really for my son, and he's going into 5th grade this year, and he was on the common with his friend, and the friend saw an Asian person. And my son is biracial, my husband's white, and so sometimes I think white people forget, that he also has this Korean side to him. And his friend just said, "Ooh, COVID." It's small, but it's real, right? And my son dutifully called him out as his little social justice self. But I think the key part of this is that this is a good kid. He comes from a good family. And I think that the cultural messages in the media and the social policies that are out there, they form around our children, right? Like you're watching TV, you see a commercial, you see and hear things on the news, you listen to what's going on in the political climate, and kids absorb these things. And because racism is such a taboo topic, the narrative to calm some of this discussion isn't there.
And do you think another part of the issue is people don't, if it's not explicit, they don't think it's as real as, as it could be?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, nobody wants to be a racist. Nobody wants to be their good intent be construed for malintent. But there's a conversation that some of my friends and I have had of intent versus impact. And I think it's very valuable that sometimes you can say things that are hurtful without meaning to, and the impact is still there, so you still need to make it better. I think that the pushback that people feel has worked and silenced a lot of these microaggressions, is kind of the popular term right now for these smaller things that, yes, no one is directly beating anybody up or directly murdering somebody else or something like that.
But, or using like the terms that, we all know,
yes,
from history.
And I think that the amount of hurt that even these words have is much bigger than I think people want to take responsibility for.
Okay. Now you made mention of the position that you are pushing for, or joining with the Equity Committee that we just talked to Sara from, the Director of Equality and excuse me, and what's the
Diversity,
word?
equity, and inclusion. Yeah.
Inclusion, thank you. That was the word that slipped from my mind. What do you think is the importance of having this role in the school department?
I think that we have a system that has always been tailored towards a white perspective. And I think that I have it, you have it. It doesn't mean we're bad people. It just means that we have grown up with a lens that is in one direction. And I think what this position will do is provide a lens to think of things from other perspectives. So if there's another instance of violence against the Black community, thinking about it from the perspective of, well, my class has one Black child in it. How will this child feel? How will the white children feel who want to reach out and support their Black friend and colleague? This position will help facilitate those conversations. I think this position will also focus on hiring and retaining other teachers and faculty of color. Right now, we have 4% non-white teachers, and we have 35% non-white students.
Big difference.
Big difference, right? And in my little engineering brain, That's about 50 students of color to one teacher of color. So the students aren't feeling supported. And I'm sure these teachers are feeling burnt out by wanting to support all these students, but the ratio is just, it's too much. So this position would help foster a climate where more teachers of color would want to come to Burlington and teach here. It would also help with incident response and protocols and tracking. There's a lot of teachers who don't know what to do. A student comes to them and we are all taught to say, oh, that's not a big deal. They didn't mean it that way. Don't be upset about that. And they need to learn a new way on how to respond. And we need to track these instances and we need to understand how these are affecting the kids. And that's what this position can do.
Yeah, long term, in your view, if kids are just always being told, don't worry about it, they didn't mean it, or, it's just words, what kind of impact moving forward in their lives do you think that would have?
It's very isolating, and I can speak for myself where I've grown up in this world where most people have said I'm too sensitive, I'm taking it the wrong way. And so you learn to not trust yourself and trust your own feelings and trust your own experience. And then what's been amazing for me with this whole racial reckoning right now is I'm finding my own voice to advocate for others. And people want to listen to what I say. People are looking for this other lens now. And it's very different. I feel like, wow, I've spent 40 years of my life being told no one cares what I think, and now people actually are listening.
Now, I take it to understand that some of the action items from the Equity Committee include changes, not just, to have this new position and hire more diverse faculty, but also curriculum changes. Just talk about the importance of that, of just, even starting in elementary school, just having more exposure to, diverse authors or, different sort of take on how we look at our own history in this country.
Well, I think it's so important because, as a grown-up, I'll listen to a story and I'll still assume the protagonist is white, right? Because I've spent my whole life growing up with that. And so I actually used to volunteer in the Fox Hill Library with Patrick Murphy, and I was always really impressed with his book selection because he really went out of his way to have, alternative protagonists, whether it be by race or by gender or by life situation. And I feel like, especially with the younger kids, that books are something that's always overlooked in their media consumption. And I think that's where you can get them. I read my kids these books, and sometimes it might be a little bit heavier than maybe is age appropriate, but they get it and they're thinking and they understand. I also think providing an accurate reflection of history will help everybody be more compassionate. So I read Trevor Noah's book, Born a Crime, and one of the things he says is that in American history, we talk about slavery as a thing that happened. We don't talk about it in the moral case of how it was a horrible thing that happened, and then what the systemic legacies of that are. And I think adding that component to the curriculum would be better for all of our students.
Yeah, there does seem to be a sort of a sense of we had slavery, we had a civil war, it was over.
Totally. And, in his book, so I'm just referencing from his book, he said that in Germany, when they learned about the Holocaust, you find any German today and they feel horrible about that and they take ownership for letting that happen, whereas Americans do not take the same ownership over our history.
So, you've been at the school committee meeting the last couple meetings talking about, this position. How's that experience been? What are you hearing from them?
It's interesting because I have only spoken with Martha Simon and Carl Foss outside of these public meetings. Mm-hmm. Martha Simon and Carl Foss, they're obviously on the district-wide equity committee, and so I have heard from them and interacted with them there. I'm hopeful. I haven't heard from Christine Monaco or Tom Murphy or Catherine Bond, but I would love for them to reach out to me or any member of BAR to learn more about how we're trying to promote anti-racism in our schools. I think that the lack of action and reaching out is a little concerning from members who seem to have more questions. And I would really hope that they would take this invitation to learn more from me or from the administration. I've enjoyed working with Mr. Larkin and the over like 40 members in the district-wide equity committee. People are participating and listening, and it seems like a really great space for growth and learning.
Yeah, that's going to be my next question, because obviously if this position is created, it's going to change things for the existing faculty. They'll have somebody else that sort of help guide their response to things, maybe putting a little pressure on them to report. But so what kind of support or any pushback from teachers or from the union?
Actually the union is very supportive of this. The Mass Teachers Association has declared racism as a public health emergency, and the BEA, the Burlington Educators Association, has supported this position and the implementation of anti-racist curriculum. And I think that's so important to know that our teachers, they want help, they want support, they want to know what their protocol is when they face an incident. They want training on how they can support students. They want resources so they can make sure their curriculum is equitable and culturally responsive. And I was very happy that Diana Marcus spoke up in the meeting in support of the position, because she's advocating for her teachers. And I think that's ultimately advocating for our students, which will make our whole community stronger.
Yeah. One of the things that our school committee did do was pass a resolution, anti-racism resolution. Do you think, that sets the tone for what should come next, or is it just sort of something that they can say and do and move on?
Well, I'm really hopeful that it sets the tone, because the anti-racism resolution had a lot of very powerful language, and it talks about the education and professional development for our teachers and our staff and our school committee. It's a commitment to our students and a representative curriculum, and it's a commitment to hiring and retaining staff of color. So all of these parts of this anti-racism resolution, to me, is a call to action for the position of a director of diversity, equity, inclusion. And I would hope that the school committee members re-look at that resolution that they all agreed to 5-0. It was unanimous. It was wonderful. It was a great step, and turn that commitment into reality, because one of the struggles that anti-racism has had is this idea of performative allies. And that is kind of like what you were alluding to, is the idea of lip service, where people say, yes, racism is bad, and no, I'm not going to do anything about it. And so I think that the school has a really good opportunity to listen to our superintendent, to listen to our students, to listen to our teachers, and to listen to our community groups, and fund this position.
Are there other actions that you'd like to see them take?
The school committee?
Yeah, or the administration.
I think that in the interim, I know that the district-wide equity committee is working on immediate steps to support our students and staff, because even if this position gets funded, it won't be funded immediately. And there is an interim from when school starts in a couple weeks to whenever that position would get filled. And so I know that the administration is working on coming up with an action plan to make sure that students feel welcome, feel safe for the start of school this year.
Now, before we started taping, you had mentioned that a survey and some data collection that has been undertaken. What is that, and what sort of is the significance of it?
So as part of the learning or the decision-making process, the school administration sent out surveys to families to see how they were feeling about their safety with COVID. And some of them shared information with regards to what the statistics are. So for the middle school, it ended up being that the overall response rate was about 70%, with Asian families responding about 70%, and white families responding 70%, but Black families only responding around 35%. So this is an example where having this director position filled would be able to recognize that instantly, prepare for that type of response, and then understand how can we reach out to these communities. There also seems to be a correlation between low response rates and families on the free lunch program or the partially free lunch program. So as we know, there is a correlation between race and socioeconomic status. And so being able to target these populations to make sure that during a pandemic or during any kinds of communications from the schools that we're reaching out to these communities so that our administration can make decisions that are for everyone, because they can't make a decision if they don't have that feedback from the communities that they're not hearing from. Now, another interesting thing with regards to the data is that out of the 70% of white respondents, 80% of those people are saying, yes, I want to do the hybrid model. They're out of the smaller Black percentage, I think it was like 60%, let me check, 67% that said, yes, I want the hybrid model. But out of the Asian community, it was only 57%. And there wasn't a question of why are you not sending your child back, but I know through my Asian circles that there are people who are afraid their children are going to be bullied or treated poorly due to the coronavirus stigma and some of the language that's been used in the media and the political scene against the Asian American population. So it seems that the data that we have collected is reflecting the realities of what's going on at a national level. And I think having a director of diversity, equity, and inclusion would provide us more ways to handle these situations to make sure that they're equitable and inclusive for all of our populations.
Excellent. And last thing, so what's the next step for your group? Is it, continue to go to the school committee meetings and speak up? Are there other actions that you're thinking about taking?
Yes, we are still going to school committee meetings. I think we're trying to figure out what the target actually is, because it seems like a target is set and it's met and then it's changed. So I think we're trying to, work with the school committee to make sure that we're getting them the exact information they need to be comfortable making decisions. But we are also supporting the town warrant that has been placed to support this position as an interim. And I think this is our immediate goal, and we have plans longer term to do a community-wide position and community-wide education and all those extra really fun things. But I think right now we're just super laser focused because, I probably put 15 to 20 hours a week into this, into preparing, into strategizing, and I think that that's something that maybe white people don't have to spend so much time doing.
Right.
But understanding that, every time I speak up or out, it's hard. And I actually feel like every time I choose to speak up and out that I'm putting myself in more danger, because some people feel so scared, but I'm not scary,
Nope.
This isn't scary, and I really welcome anyone to come talk to me, and if they're interested in BAR to in helping to reach out, we have a website, an email address, burlingtonagainstracism@gmail.com.
Okay.
So people can reach out to us.
Thank you for coming in, sharing your thoughts and views, and taking the time to do so.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you.
We go now to my interview with Assistant Superintendent Patrick Larkin to get a perspective from the administration. He is also a liaison to the Equity Committee. Let's take a look.
Patrick, thanks for joining me here today.
Thanks for having me.
It's an interesting topic, and I kind of hope we spend some time delving into it.
Sure.
Let's just start off. What's your role with the Equity Committee?
Right now, I've pretty much been coordinating the meetings, trying to take the lead from the district central office and making sure that we can address some of the priority items. We have a pretty extensive action plan that we've created. Again, I want to give credit to Carrie Purchase and one of her assistants, Chen Fine, who did a lot of work on creating the district action plan, just about what are some of our short-term issues and long-term issues that we'd like to address. And so we're just trying to check those off as best we can at this point.
And what, in your view, was sort of like the inspiration for the creation of the committee?
Well, the committee's been in place for over a year. We had some other groups that kind of had some similar aspirations, but I think the turning point for us was it's almost 2 years now. Sara Shaikh, who is one of our student members, and she's our student council advisory board rep to the school committee this year. She and a group of students who are part of the ideas group at the high school they came to a school committee meeting and asked for certain things to happen. And one of them was a district-wide equity committee. So that was kind of the impetus to get this group together. We had met as a group of educators as part of a program we had with the union called the District Capacity Project that looked at some issues of equity, and that was just staff. So when the students came in, I think things really started gaining momentum because you don't really know what's happening in your building until you talk to the students.
Yeah.
And we have great students that are they've been so open and honest in sharing their experiences and of their colleagues, and they really want to see us tighten some things up that they see as problems for future generations of students here at the high school. So and I know we've had teachers that have had that vision for a long time as well. So just having everybody coordinated this year, we've been fortunate to add some parents from the community. So we're really building a pretty broad coalition. So it's been a lot of fun to be part of it, and we have some work that we're really focused on.
Sounds great. So you talked about the students sharing their experiences. What are some of those that maybe surprised you when they were brought to your attention?
Well, myself as the former principal of the high school and being here now at, 12 or 13 years total after, I think I've been in central office for 7 or 8, lose count after a while. But you think, hey, we're a typical high school or we're better than a typical high school when it comes to the way people treat each other and or not. But as a white man going through the world, I can't say I'm as attuned to microaggressions as I should be.
Mm-hmm.
The little things that might be directed at students of color or impact families of color in the community. And to hear the students talk about some of the things that have been said to them was eye-opening. And I think we all agree, we don't want to be a typical community when it comes to these issues. We want to be better than typical. We want all of our kids to know that they're valued. And if we just are on cruise control saying, hey, we're a pretty good place, we treat our kids pretty well, and aren't really talking to students of color and people from different groups, then we're not doing our job. So I think we need to know what it's like to be a black student, a gay student, an Indian student, go down the list. We need to know what it's like to be in any position in our district, and we need to know that these students feel supported by us. And if we're not doing some explicit work, then we're not supporting them.
And you think that the committee is making good progress as far as,
I think we're moving forward. I don't want to put the measure. I think we've
Mm-hmm.
made good progress on some things, and I think there's other things we'd like to make faster progress on. So I think right today, we have some good momentum going in our work, and the difficult thing is to maintain that momentum. So I just want to say we have a group of close to 30 folks that are been attending meetings throughout the summer and checking in and being very active. And my concern when the school year ended was that we were going to lose some of this momentum because we were going to be so focused on reopening schools.
Right.
And let's be clear, reopening schools has equity concerns, just in that process as well. So that's something we're looking at now. But the fact that this group, with everything else going on, it's the summer, they've lost zero focus on the work that needs to be done, and they deserve a lot of credit.
Yeah, definitely. Usually student groups don't continue over the summer. So it's interesting that, this one, they see the mission as so important that they would,
Yeah, and just to clarify, there's students that have been involved consistently, but we have 10 to 12 teachers, if not more. There's school administrators, and there's parents that have been, again, every meeting during the summer, so it's been great.
Now, one of the recommendations that has come up is the creation of a new position, the
Right.
Director of Equity and Inclusion. Just talk about, what that person would do.
Right. There's a lot. I mean, if you look at our again at our action plan, and that we have a job description that we've created. It's just honestly keeping our eye on the ball on all these issues of equity that can impact a school on a daily basis. I think, unfortunately, we get into the year and the weeds, and we tend to lose focus on this. And I think the turning point for us was the murder of George Floyd,
Mm-hmm.
and then our students speaking on the town common, some of our graduates, and talking about their experience dealing with, some people say they're microaggressions, some of them were explicitly racist acts that occurred towards them. So I just want to be clear on that. And a lot of people were taken aback, and we could be defensive about it and point fingers, but the bottom line is we need plans in place to make sure that these types of events don't continue to happen, that those students aren't spoken to or demeaned because of their race. So, part of it is putting some protections. I mean, we have protections in place, but putting explicit plans in place to deal with those issues, setting up affinity groups, I think, so students of color have opportunities to get together and talk about, with support, what it's really like to be a Burlington High School student or a Burlington Public School student. There's curriculum work, if we're really going to do a good job of this, I think, and chart a different course for the future of our district. These conversations need to start happening when students are young, with some curricular support. So those are a few of the things. To run sessions for staff, we had a group of our administrators, department heads, special ed team chairs. So about 40 of us of our district leadership team went through a 6-day program with a woman by the name of Dr. Khalees Warnham, who leads groups through anti-racist work. And what we noticed when we were given scenarios, if this happened between a student of color and a white student, or a student or staff member of color and a white colleague, like, how would you handle it? And a lot of us aren't comfortable. I'll say I'm not comfortable all the time saying I know exactly how I should handle that situation. So we can't support our students if we don't know how to handle those situations. So again, to have somebody who can run through groups, run through scenarios, we need to react in a supportive way when these things happen. Because a lack of reaction, from what they're telling us, our students of color and our staff members of color, a lack of reaction is just supporting that microaggression or that racist action. If I just saw it and I'm like, oh, I don't know what to say, I'm just gonna avoid dealing with it. Like, that's not the way we can handle it. In fact, the only, I think, inappropriate reaction is a non-reaction. So those are the types of things that need to be done. There's certainly a longer list, our hiring practices, what can we do to have more people apply for positions, a more diverse group apply for positions here in Burlington, and how can we support them if we hire more colleagues of color? How can we support them when they're here? So
it's a mixture of immediate educational things. This is what you know, maybe filling in, you don't know what you don't know kind of thing.
Exactly.
And then long-term goals as far as, just fostering a more diverse faculty.
Yeah, and it's building the climate where, again, we don't have to think about how we would react to these situations. Like we've all been. I mean, somebody talked about we need professional development on this, and teachers need professional development. But I don't even want to talk about it as professional development. It's human development. I mean, I think that's the type of community we want to create here. So we want people to be comfortable talking about this, not just in Burlington, but when they go out into the world. They're comfortable dealing with these situations. So that's what our work is. It's challenging, but it's exciting to be in the middle of it, and it's exciting to have so many people that are involved in supporting it.
Now, from watching the school committee meeting, it seems like everybody is in favor of this, but there's some concerns about timing. Just talk about what the process of bringing on a new person would be, and the difficulties posed by the pandemic and the impact that it's going to have on, local receipts and possibly state aid.
Yeah, I mean, clearly every time you hear the news, we talk about, the way the economy's going, and in Burlington, where so much of our funding for schools comes from the commercial tax base, and a lot of these businesses are struggling or closing, and so it's going to have a direct impact on our immediate budget. So I understand we typically never add positions that we didn't budget for. It's very unusual. I'm sure there are a few exceptions historically. So I think the biggest concern is about that. In the best of times, we probably wouldn't add a position just that we didn't budget for unless there was some critical need. And now added the pandemic. I think that's the concern. I think myself as a member of the Equity Committee and the folks that are on the Equity Committee feel like this is a historic moment. The pandemic is highlighting some of the issues that our most vulnerable populations are facing, and that includes our students of color, people that have been underserved historically. And the feeling of the Equity Committee is that now is the time. But we understand. I think we want to get this position in place. There is support. I think it will happen, within the next year. And I think our goal in central office, if it doesn't move forward like through town meeting, which again, it's not my position to I respect the school committee's position. So I'm not questioning their judgment. Like, they've been on school committee longer than I've been in the district, some of them. So, but our job is to have a long-range plan, and so I think I want to make sure we keep dealing with our action plan and having momentum and making constructive choices that people who are on the Equity Committee, again, our students, like, they can see that we're taking this seriously, and it's not just it's going to the back burner again type of thing.
Yeah, keep it front and center.
Yep.
So is that likely what we're going to see, is a warrant article, or will it just be part of the budget?
Again, the last conversation was I think was kind of left up in the air in regards to the fall town meeting. I think what I'm hearing is there's some town meeting members that could potentially bring something forward. So again, I'm not sure where we stand on that right now, but I heard 100% that the school committee members are supporting this for next year's budget at the very least.
Okay. And last thing, and I kind of want to just end on what I would consider a positive note. There's just the fact that there are so many students and teachers and administrators involved in the committee, and there seems to be, general support. Just what do you think that says sort of just about the character of this district?
I mean, I think it's always been one that we support one another. So I think, again, some people knew this already, and some people were living with blinders on, not seeing what was happening to some of our students or how they were being treated, or that we're part of the world and Burlington's no different than the rest of the world. And I think it was a slap across the face. I'll talk for myself personally, and we're not willing to live with the way things are or the way they were. They need to be better than they were in the past. So I think it says a lot about the community. I'm not surprised, because we care about our students, and when we see that our students don't have what they need to be successful, or that they're being traumatized, then we're not going to sit back and say that's okay.
All right. Well, it's definitely something that we'll follow as it goes through the process, the committee and then, the position. So I want to thank you for taking some time today to come down and talk with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
And there you have it. Two groups trying to fight racism in Burlington Public Schools. I'd like to thank my guest, Sara Shaikh of the BHS Equity Committee, Martha Duffield of the Burlington Against Racism Parent Group, and Assistant Superintendent Patrick Larkin. I'd also like to thank all of you for watching. We'll be back next month with another edition of BNEWS In Depth, so stay tuned.